Hello, everyone. It's another episode of Tailgate Talk. We're your hosts, David, Nick, and Joseph. Boys, say hi to the people.
Howdy.
Well, what a conference championship weekend. What a selection Sunday show. I want to get right into it because, I mean, just huge precedent set by the committee this year. Conference championships, making your conference championships matter. SMU is in, Alabama's out, and it could not happen to a better fan base. Oh my God. I'm gonna go off on a rant right off the bat, boys. So feel free to jump in if you want, but the amount of whining, the amount of upset people, not just fans, but the actual athletic director of Alabama going off and saying that you know what, their out of conference schedule must have been too hard. That was what kept them out. When they played the likes of um, what they played Wisconsin, they played Mercer, they played South Florida, and who was the last team, Nick?
Mercer, South Florida, Western Kentucky. Did you say that?
Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky. Their best win against Wisconsin, who finished 15th in the Big Ten. 15th. And they didn't lose any of those games, but I think that's what hurt their schedule. No. Alabama, I don't think that's the case. I think the problem is that you lost to Vanderbilt. I think the problem is that you went into Norman and got shellacked by an Oklahoma team that I love Brent. I'm wishing him the best, but God, they are not a good football team this year. And you went in there and you made it where they're bowl eligible. Good for you. But Lord Almighty, to say that that your out of conference schedule being too hard was the problem is a take of all takes. My God, this is just
Thought
awful.
I'll go next if you guys don't mind. So my problem with the Alabama issue, the Alabama on ESPN coverage was not as much their AD, but Saban whining like he's still the head coach and trying to market himself like he's fighting for a chance to the playoff. My man, you are happily retired. You are making a probably boatload of money. I don't know, but you're probably making a boatload of money to sit on TV. And between you saying it's not working, the mic's not working, the screen's not working, right? As they're coming off commercial and saying that it's an atrocity, acting like, somebody was like, you know, got seriously ill or like something like life threatening, like was ridiculous. Like, I don't know. I just felt like he was on his high horse during the entire show. It felt very like get off my lawn esque, as I said to you guys in the chat. Um, I just I like I get it. It's your school. You spent a lot of time there over the course of your career, but at some point, like we get it. We got your take. Like I didn't have to hear it 24 times in order to understand the fact that you wanted Alabama in over SMU. You just kept repeating yourself the entire show. You didn't add any extra information as probably the greatest coach of all time. You didn't add any extra filler to that show. So I could live without Nick Saban on ESPN, and I could live without him being there the entire show. If they want to like call him or like zoom him in, and he can complain that Alabama is either in or out, he can do that. But there was just no point in having him there for the whole show.
the other
Yeah, I
thing.
mean, I just it's gonna take some time for the goat to take off his crimson colored glasses.
That's
I
what it
mean,
felt like. That's the best way to put it.
he's on. Well, I mean, put it this way: he was on the show wearing a crimson jacket with a crimson tie. My God, man, you don't have to stick with the color scheme anymore. Is like just a little dig because that's how it's coming off. You're coming off as you're still campaigning for Alabama.
And then
Needless
he
to
would
say that
say, I
this
think,
exact scenario is where they got the benefit of the doubt over a Penn State team, what, 2, 3 years ago? So
yeah.
for me, my issue is the goalposts moving, constantly moving, like immediately into all of this. when Alabama misses out on the playoff and they're like, oh, this is a travesty. This is awful. We gotta fix things around the seating. It's no good. Like, needless to say that's how it was going in the entire year. They made sure everyone was very clear about how this was going to work, and they just did not fathom that this would mean that you'd have SEC teams going on the road, or Texas having to host Clemson, or Alabama being left out. Let the damn season play out. I have been thoroughly enjoyed this college football season for the chaos that it has brung, the uncertainty, the chance that pretty much it's shown that any team could beat any team on any given day. That's exciting. That's what college football is all about.
And not only that,
And
but any
to
team
say
can
that
make
you
the
need
playoff.
to you need to protect these big brand teams because they didn't get in, like before it even happens. I mean, the whole singularity point of having conference champions having the auto bid, and not just that, but the first round bye for the top four was to incentivize winning your conference, to reward those teams for doing that. And now they're saying, well, not all conferences are created the same. Guess what? Here's how the math works. Are you ready? South Carolina, or not South, the SEC plays one less conference championship or one less conference game than the Big Ten. The SEC, that means that they are guaranteed to have that fourth out of conference game where they're playing an FCS team in the middle of November. Whereas if you had another conference game there, half those teams would have had a loss. And guess what that means? The number of SEC teams that would be bowl eligible drops. That's why there's only three SEC teams that are not bowl eligible because they padded their schedule with these FCS games. I've been going through all of these games. They were 13-6 against Power Four opponents. I didn't even bother looking through the FCS or Group of Five games because there were too many to count. Meanwhile, I went over and I looked at Big 12 and Big 10, and I think there was a total of 10 games per conference against Power Four competition, but it wasn't because they were playing FCS. There were some that were doing some of that, but it was because they had that extra conference game.
Well, I just to add to 2 points there. First of all, the 12-team playoff was created so that you could include those big brands that are in there every year perennially since this playoff started in 2014. You could add more of the smaller brands, right? And then the second point to add on to there, which I thought of while you were speaking, was this how does Alabama become a big brand, right? Like Alabama has always been a big brand, but how did Clemson become a big brand? By getting into the playoffs, by beating Alabama, by constantly winning, correct? At least for when I got into college football, was kind of like the start of like Dabo Sweeney's dynasty, right? How does Boise State become a perennial not power, but like how do they become a perennial team year in and year out who's successful? Because you can't you when you get into the 12-team playoff and when you include these teams or when you include like an SMU for example, right? Because Boise won their conference, right? So let's leave them out. But on argument's sake, for SMU, it's a smaller program. It's based in Dallas. They're not winning their state recruiting every year because it's either Texas or Texas A&M, and then Texas Tech always has a shot too. How do you make them a bigger brand? How do you make them more successful? Okay, throw them in the playoffs. See what they can do. We already know what Alabama is. They lost to they were 21 point underdogs or 21 point favorites against a Oklahoma team when they went into Norman and they lost that game. They also lost to Vanderbilt. Like these are teams that Alabama should be winning. And if they win, fine, put them in. But they didn't win those games this year. So my whole point, I guess, is like in the most broadest sense, is it's not bad to put these teams in. It's not bad for them to build a brand. It's not bad for more teams to kind of expand the top of the pyramid. I don't know. That's my take on it. But for a guy who likes parity, for a guy who has also loved the season more than any other, and every year, every week for like the last like 8 weeks, my shout out was the playoff race, this season, right? This season was great because you had other teams that had a shot. That's what made this so great because it wasn't just the four regular teams of Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, and who else am I'm blanking on the other one. But you had more than that. So let these teams have more than that. Why are you arguing against an SMU who can build a brand? I don't know. I hated it. I hope that made sense because it sounded to make sense to me, but
Yeah, I want to make another point before I know Nick, you're waiting patiently to jump in here, but I just went through and I counted how many teams made were bowl eligible because that's been the mark of saying, hey, our conference is really strong. Look at all these bowl games we have. The SEC has 13 teams in, only three that did not make it into the bowl. And you have three of those teams, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, and Oklahoma, who are 6-6. You add another conference game in there, and they are more than likely 5-7 instead of 6-6. So that's now down to 10. That would be one ahead of the Big 12 that has nine, and behind the ACC and the Big 10, who also have 13 right now. So you're telling me that your lauded conference, that you are loading, that you have four out of conference games where I went through it. Only one, I think each one of them at most had, I think that the most that any one team had was two, two games against Power Four competition, like Georgia going to playing Clemson and Georgia Tech. So everybody else playing three Group of Five or FCS games to ensure that they are at 4-0 out of conference or 3-1 at worst. This is that's my whole point is that I it it does when you beat up when you don't have to play yourselves as much and you're loading it up with this type of out of conference bull crap, then of course you're gonna have more teams in the bowl games and you're gonna look better because of that because you beat up on that. Now, did they go in and hand the ACC their clock this year? Sure. I'm not going to argue that. They absolutely did. But that's the point. You're trying to claim that you're not doing that you're scheduling it too hard. No, that's not happening. You're beating up on lesser teams and relying on the conference itself having a reputation of being tough. Whereas if you really did play yourself more, like what Alabama was suggesting they basically do, then y'all are the third out of four Power Four teams in terms of bowl games.
Nick, real quick before I lose my train of thought, and then you could speak. There's two things I want to hit real quick. Last week, I criticized the committee, okay, because I did not think that they were going to make the right decision. So if I'm going to criticize them, I'm also going to give them props. They made the right decision, and they made a good decision. They made the decision that they they kind of instilled in the beginning of this whole season, right? That's number one. Number two is if Alabama should be mad at anybody, and this is no offense to you guys, but they should be mad at Clemson because Clemson is the ultimate bid stealer, right?
Hell yeah.
Who would have thought that this first 12 team playoff we would have had such a big bid stealer because that's literally what happened. You guys know I'm a huge college basketball fan, right? For like a team in the Big East, right? You go a little bit over 500, maybe you win a game or two in your conference title, but you don't win your conference. There's a chance that because you didn't win your conference, that your bid gets stolen by some small team like Holy Cross, who's 4-12 2 years ago, and wins the conference. Your bid's stolen. That's your fault. That's not anybody else's fault but your own. So if Alabama wants to sit here and cry and whine, fine, go ahead. But guess whose fault it is ultimately? It's yours. And it's kind of Clemson's because they shouldn't have been in this in the first place. No offense.
Yeah, Clemson's the only three-loss team in. Alabama
Yeah,
also
no
has three
offense.
losses.
No, like
If you're
I
gonna lose three games, you got to win your conference.
correct.
That's what it basically is.
And I think they have a shot against Texas. We'll get into that later. But at the same time, they shouldn't be here. They shouldn't be in this party. So it's Alabama's fault. You didn't win your conference and you didn't put yourself in the position to get in. So stop whining and crying. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. You have the floor, Nick.
All right, Nick, get in there, Nick.
Forgot I was still on this thing.
I had a
It
lot
all
to say. You
boils
knew that going in.
it all boils down to the fact that the SEC just has the superiority complex, and it's always nice when uh some forces decide to take them down a peg. Like how Georgia and Kirby called out Greg Sankey when he's accepting the award because he gave Georgia a tough schedule. Meanwhile, they only left the state of Georgia for 4 games all year. It's the same stuff every year. It's never going to change. The SEC thinks they're better than everybody else, so when bad things happen, they just complain and cry, and that's when change happens when an SEC team gets left out. So I'm not surprised at all. I mean, it proves that Alabama is a terrible academic school because the arguments coming out of that camp is just dumb, but it's expected. And the other point I wanted to make, kind of playing contradictory, I don't really like the auto buys. I think that it's penalizing specific teams for winning their conference. Like you look at Oregon's draw, they get the winner of Tennessee and Ohio State. Meanwhile, Penn State gets SMU and Boise State. Like even just looking at that, um, just looking at those matchups alone, you're telling me you get to go undefeated, number one team in the country, and you get the winner of Tennessee and Ohio State. Meanwhile, Penn State loses their conference championship game. They get SMU, who, by all accounts, like again, I was pounding the table for them to get in, but they didn't win their conference. They lost the two biggest games that they played to BYU and Clemson, and then you get a group of five Boise State that. I mean, it's Boise State's different than Cincy, but you look at the group of five's track record in the playoff, it's not strong. Arguably, Oregon should
Yeah,
have
I
lost
got
that.
a thought on that. I got a thought on that because you're starting to do what I think the SEC and the talking heads have started to do and projecting out on what you expect to happen. This year, anything can happen. I'm sorry, Penn State, I think is fraudulent. I think SMU's going in there and beating them. It's noon kickoff. It's not late at night. It's going to be cold, but you know what? At least it's not at night. I and the way that SMU played against Clifton, I honest to God think that they'll be able to make adjustments. That their offense is going to be able to put up points. You're not going to be able to keep them down, like Penn State has done to other teams. And you see, the one time that they played a team with a pulse was Ohio State, and they did not look good. This is my point. I mean, they did look fine against Oregon. Sure, I'll give
And
them
I
that.
think
They didn't win
and
it though. That's James Franklin's MO is he will not win those big games. So to say that they got the better draw, wait until you see what happens. If they go ahead and shellac SMU and then run over Boise State, sure, then you can maybe say something. But who knows?
and I think
Who
that
knows right now? That's the whole point of this. And to start moving the goalposts before the games are even played is revisionist history. It's without even having a history to look at. It's asinine. You need to watch the season play out, and then you can make a decision. Because what happens here if Clemson makes a run, if SMU makes a run, you're going to say that or Oregon for getting that automatic bid and Arizona State are not getting a better draw. Like for you want you need to that boils down to putting stake and value on winning your conference and having something that we do not like by winning your conference means that the regular season mattered. That was the
So,
biggest thing that we were hearing before this playoff was happening was the concern about what is that going to do to the meaning of the regular season. College football has the best regular season ever. It does. It just straight up that is there's no There is no contest. Every week matters. Every game matters. And when you lose, it has impact. So guess what? Texas, you probably should have lost to Georgia twice. Ohio State, you lost to Oregon, and you lost to Michigan. You beat Michigan. Guess what? You get to play Oregon to try and avenge that loss and get a bye. Penn State, you lost to Ohio State. You got lucky, but then you didn't get the chance when you were given it to then beat Oregon to get that bye. You
So
got to win the games.
you
And
said the
also,
regular season.
go ahead.
No, it's fine. Mine's a little longer. Go ahead.
So, real quick, also, I kind of tuned out there because I was reading something Bill Belichick related.
Ranking got it.
No, I was reading something Bill Belichick related because it's contract details. But also, like, everyone's kind of like counting out Oregon. Like, they might have a tough game against Tennessee or Ohio State. I don't think that's the case. Like, I know that's projecting. It's just the other side of things. But you're talking about a team that the only team in this playoffs that went undefeated, that finished what, 13 and 0? And also, how good did they look? How good did Tez Johnson look in the game against Penn State? They are playing their best football currently right now. I understand they have some weeks in between last week in the playoffs, but I don't think that team is like got a crappy draw. Like I still think they're head and shoulders above the rest. They have flaws, sure. Every team in this playoff has flaws, right? But I think they're head and shoulders above the rest. I think they have less flaws than everybody else. Go ahead.
So with my whole argument of reseeding, you got so if you look at the rankings, not the seeds, but the rankings, you have Oregon plays the winner of 6 versus 7. Meanwhile, Penn State gets to play the 10th ranked team, and then if they win that, they play the ninth ranked team. So no matter who, if Penn State beats SMU, no matter who wins that Tennessee Ohio State game, based on regular season results, Oregon's playing the better team. Like you can say that a team's overranked or whatever. Based on rankings, Oregon is playing the tougher team as the number one overall undefeated seed. And here's the other thing: Arizona State gets a bye and the 4 seed. Meanwhile, they're only ranked based on the regular season rankings. They're only ranked higher than one team, and that's Clemson that got in because they kicked the 56-yard field goal. I'm all for auto bids. I just think that you need to reseed at the playoffs to reward the regular season even more
I don't
because
hate that.
because you're saying you should have stock in the conference championship game. That's one game. Like it
Disagree. I
that's
think it's the
boiling
whole
it.
season.
That's boiling. Yeah,
I
but
think it's
I'm
the whole season because you're talking about Ohio State and Tennessee here that did not make their playoff game, and you're talking or their conference championship. I I honest to God, like, do you really want to play SMU right now if you're Penn State? Do you really want to play Boise State? They're playing hot.
I think I
This
think
is
that if you're
the
Penn State and you get a team from the South coming to Happy Valley where it's going to be less than 20 degrees, you take that every time. Because right now, if we reseeded it, it would be what four? They'd get the bye. So I mean, but look also, and I know it's not Penn State, but Notre Dame they're the number 5 ranked team in the country. They had one regular season loss to Northern Illinois, terrible loss, but they bounced back and they get rewarded by playing an Indiana team that lost one game in the season. If they got re-ranked, they'd be playing Clemson, a 3-loss team right now in South Bend, where Clemson cannot play, or I should say, they cannot win in South Bend. Like you're telling me that Notre Dame would rather play? I feel like they'd rather play Indiana than Clemson, or I think they'd rather play Clemson than Indiana. Sorry,
I think it's a wash in that situation. I wouldn't want
but
to
like
see. I think we can beat Indiana, and but I think that Indiana's like everyone's counting Indiana out already. I think Kurt Signetti is going to have that team ready. But go ahead, and I think
I just
Clemson's going to
my
be the
main
same
point
way.
is I don't like that this is the conversation that you're having of we need to make adjustments because it's not ideal for all these teams in the middle of it. You don't know yet. You haven't seen them play. You
well,
haven't seen it happen
we
yet.
can revisit it after the playoff, but I just looking at it right now, I feel like Oregon got screwed. Oregon
So here's my
specifically.
question: if Oregon goes on and wins it all, What do you read from that?
Then okay, then I'd be willing to change my opinion. I'm just saying, as of right now, I'm looking at the rankings right now. If they reseeded, they'd be playing the 8-9 is Indiana Boise State. You're telling me they wouldn't rather have that matchup than Ohio State Tennessee?
I
I'm
don't
just
know.
saying.
I'm
I
Switzerland.
think that
I'm Switzerland. I see both sides in this. I see the side that it's the regular season, the whole thing matters, right? And at the end of the day, it's all projections. But I also see your point where, hey, if we reseeded, is that the worst thing in the world? I don't know. I don't think so. But
I
again,
mean,
that's going off of projections, which kind of stinks. So I
yeah.
don't know.
Guess what? The rankings are all subjective too. This is all based off of, you know, perception and bias that's built into these different conferences. It's it's not because you have 134 FBS teams, because you have nine conferences. We're not counting Pac-12, but you have nine conferences plus independents. None of the scheduling is even, is fair. It's all different metrics. There is no good way to truly value wins and losses objectively. So, in my opinion, I think you need to put stock in winning your conference because you're playing these teams, getting that value. Honest to God, if it were me, my preference would be you've got nine um, conferences. Go ahead and give them each get you get your conference winner, your conference loser. They get to go. So that's 18 teams, and you run into that in terms of that's how you get in. Notre
so.
Dame join a conference.
So
Like
you
that's
think
the whole
off
point of all of that is that you
off
you
that
you
logic though,
you value winning your conference. You don't even have to do out of conference games. Just let the best teams out of the conference go in, play, and if you win in that playoff, then you're in, and that's it. But it's not like the NFL where you've got like a built-in structure. This is so subjective. It's all about rankings. It's all about a committee. It's impossible. And to then say that you want to move the goalpost before you see the results, you need to see the rest of the season because we thought that the regular season was going to be tarnished from a 12 team playoff, that it wasn't going to matter. Guess what? We went into the last 2 weeks where every single game mattered. Did you see the craziness that was going on with the Big 12 and the SEC on who was going to make that conference championship to get an auto bid? Clemson needing Syracuse to come out with a massive win against Miami in order to get in and have a chance to spoil the fun and knock Bama out. Like this was fantastic, and you're not letting it play all the way through.
so in your proposed 18 team playoff, Indiana's sitting at home right now. Would you rather have Indiana in the playoff or a team like Jacksonville State or a team like
Indiana
Marshall?
didn't win their conference.
They lost one game all year, and
Yeah, and they looked like crap in it.
you'd rather see two Sun Belt teams in the playoff than Indiana.
I hate this argument because you're talking about what is perceived best versus most deserving. I want you to deserve to win by winning your conference. That's all I want.
Okay. I believe that there are the Power Four, as much as we hate it, they have better teams than the Group of Five. You put Indiana up against any team that was in their conference championship in the Group of Five, Indiana wins that game by two touchdowns, guarantee it. So I'm not a fan of the 18 team make it to your conference championship game. You're in the playoff because that leaves some really good teams out, namely Indiana. Ohio State
Well,
wouldn't be in it.
they already said that they're looking into a 14 team playoff. I don't know if that helps or not, but
Well,
I
it works
just
for me because I'm just saying this is again you get through 1 year and because the perception is because Bama got left out, we have to change all the rules.
I'm
You
not
do
about
that, you make it a 14 team playoff, and you're adding in Bama and this year Miami, but they probably would have gone out to 16. I heard one of my friends say he wants to that it should be 16 because Bama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina are all playoff worthy teams. Guess what? They didn't win enough games.
yeah.
Win your freaking games and you're in. It's like bitching and moaning about the refs making calls and you not getting a win because of that. Just don't even put in that situation. Win your games. Beat Oregon and and be 13-0. You know, beat Georgia and go 11-2, beating Texas twice. Do
I'm
just
not
win your damn games.
I'm not saying move the goalpost to get in. I'm just saying reseed when you get in there. That's my thought. And I get what you're saying with the win your games, make your conference championship, but Indiana losing one game and not making their playoff because of a tiebreaker or making their conference because of a tiebreaker, that I don't think that's fair to penalize them that much over one game.
Well, Nick, if you look at their schedule, do you want to change your tune? Because they beat Florida International, Western Illinois, UCLA, which went 3-6 in the conference, 5-7 overall. Charlotte, they beat Maryland, who was where are they? Where the heck is Maryland in the standings? I can't even find them.
Down, all the way down.
Indiana's
All the way down
Indiana's
at
strength
one
of
and eight in the
schedule isn't
conference,
good.
4-8.
Indiana's strength of schedule
Northwestern,
isn't good, but they only lost one game. I believe that in
And
this
if
system,
I'm gonna play devil's advocate
I'm
on
just
Nick's
taking your
behalf,
argument. You're saying they were are a better team. I don't know if they proved it yet because the one team that they played that was good was Ohio State. They lost 38-15. Didn't even look like they were in it.
but so wait, your whole thing was you
I'm
want
taking your
conference.
argument. I am using your argument
Yeah, and I'm going
here.
to take your argument. You want conference champions from every conference just because
That was
you're
honestly a hyperbolic
okay.
explanation of
Well,
it.
that's the way it came
I
across.
was
Is
going beyond because I was saying, you know what? Screw it. You got to win your conference is my point. Like that was being
okay.
that was
That's
honestly a
the
little
only
bit
reason
tongue
I.
in cheek for me.
That's the only reason I brought up Indiana in the first place because you're talking about putting in Jacksonville State and Marshall over Indiana, which
Why
I
not?
think is stupid. Because it's
Why not?
stupid. Indiana won 11 games. You can't help who you play in the conference. It's not their fault they didn't draw Penn State. They beat Michigan, who beat Ohio State. Michigan had a down year. They still beat Ohio State. I'm just saying.
And that's my other point is that any team can beat any team. So why are you getting all bent out of shape over you gotta buy. You gotta buy as Oregon. Find out what happens.
Yeah, and then you got to play
Good Lord.
You got to play Ohio State or Tennessee. That's
we
not
have
All
fair.
right.
hey boys, we have
So
4 minutes.
4 minutes left
Oh God.
of our time. We didn't even get to talk about Bill Belichick and didn't even get to talk about what was supposed to be the 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 beauty that is this week, which is Army Navy. So we might need to like
Let's make our
speed run
picks real
through that
quick.
real quick.
David has a stranglehold. Joe did well. I did okay. Army Navy Army go Army beat Navy.
Yeah, real quick. I'm just gonna take 30 seconds here. This game is about not. It's more than football, right? It's about the courageous men and women who put courage and bravery before all else for the freedom of this country and for our freedoms. The people who have to sacrifice their lives and sacrifice their time with their family to serve this country. It's about them, and that's what makes this game beautiful. I'm going with Army because they're 10 times better than the Navy team. And also, always go Army, beat Navy.
The Army beat Navy. This is what college football is about. Tradition, pageantry. If you haven't been to this game yet, you got to go. One day, Nick, we got Joe, we got to get there.
I
This
worked
isn't
it
a
one
can't
year.
miss thing.
I worked it one year. It was cool.
It's a can't miss thing. Thank you to all the servicemen and women who defend our country and give us the freedom to yell at each other on YouTube because college football is so great and there's nothing like the uniforms at this game. So Nick, show them off.
These are
And
Navies.
also,
They got the Jolly Rogers, and then Armies. Uh, I forget what
101st
the
Air.
name of it is officially, but it's showing off the Battle of Bastogne, where the Nazis had them completely circled, and they sent in leaflets saying unconditional surrender or else, and the official reply was nuts.
and
So
this game every year I tune in early is my point because CBS does an amazing intro every year. It seems like it always makes me cry. I This country is so great, and it just puts all of this game and this country together into one and mixes it, and it gives you all this emotion. And yeah, just tune in early if you can. Watch that CBS intro because it gets better and better by the year.
And with that, we've got less than a minute left. So guess what? Bill Belichick's back in football,
5 years,
college football,
5 years,
UNC for 5 years.
5 years, and Michael
I think he's
Lombardi
gonna
from
get
the
sick
Pat
after
McAfee
two.
show is his GM.
I think he retires after two. Says screw it. I'm tired of dealing with NIL and all these uh, college kids that don't want to listen to
NIL is like
Bill
free
Belichick as
agency
a
in
drill
football. He'll be
sergeant.
fine. He'll be fine.
He's gonna get all the NFL guys' kids. That's all.
Go Army, beat Navy.
Go
Yeah, go
Army,
Army.
beat Navy.